Nipsey, forgive me, I can't stay home. I'm going to the lake, gonna paddle my boat. Had enough Netflix, 4,000 lives.
Okay, that is One-Eyed Jack and the Shells, World War III. This is the Infinite Plane Radio live, louder than ever. Fixed the volume last night. I want to say thanks to all of you persistent audio critics for all of your helpful advice. And right after last night's live stream, I found the solution. I found it on Reddit, and now we're back, and you should be able to hear me. Esteban says, your levels are no different than the channel I just came from. Okay, good. Well, they obviously figured it out before I did. It's one of these things in OBS. If anybody uses this software and has any questions, I'll happily tell them what I did, or I'll send them a link so you can do the same. The conspiracy to silence us is very multifaceted, including this tech stuff. Because it wasn't like that before. When I first started live streaming, it was loud. And then it just went kind of progressively lower, and Skype gradually screwed up their whole thing. Google Hangouts was destroyed. YouTube was messed up from the perspective of they destroyed the search functions, rendering it useless to anybody who wants to figure out what's really going on. All right, joined by Esteban, X322, Dinah South, Reverse History. And if you look on the screen, this is the flyer. Oh, you know what? I didn't send out the live stream notifications. So if you're subscribed to the newsletter, and I think Patreon got it, but if you're subscribed to the newsletter, you're going to get live, louder than ever before, notification in your inbox. Just look at the email and click the first link. Joined by Patricia Steer. Well, I think we should give everyone a little more time to show up, so let's just go ahead and go over this. The IPS presents Autohoax Con number 2, and this will take place on October the 26th, 2024, from 12 to 5. And right now I'm seeking content creators. This is open to podcasts, videos, art, or music. And if you want to speak and present some content to the audience and engage in a Q&A, just contact me here. You can just use the QR code or go to insider.online for any sort of contact with me regarding this. A number of people have sent me links to videos they want me to include, which I will, and I'll credit everyone who sends me anything at all. But it's open. There's hours. Last time we had 3 speakers. This time I'd like to have at least a couple more. And the concept of this is to introduce this third branch of media that exists outside of the controlled dialectic of mainstream and alternative, a position that's not platformed, that's not even acknowledged. The people who say Trump was shot by the deep state, they're alternative. They haven't figured it out yet. They are still kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And we don't want them. They're welcome as audiences, but as far as presenters go, everything has to come from the off-world stage perspective. Joined by K-Ways and Armin Ree. Thank you for joining. And also, on this next one, we're going to have a few other improvements. For example, each of the sections will be uploaded separately. We want to really get this information around. And it's not like we're doing proselytizing or outreach to people who don't have a clue, but rather, I think what we're trying to do is be more accessible to mainstream truthers who are in this cul-de-sac and they don't know it. Phones are open, 505-510-4226. I got an interesting comment from someone today I want to reference. And he was describing to me how difficult it is to convey this stuff to the normies in his life. And I've made my opinions pretty clear on what I think about proselytizing and reaching Normieville. And my point is you let the blue pillars dream, and the red pillars who are in this nightmare state, at least they're accessible. At least they're searching. So let me go ahead and bring up the comment. Okay, so this was from James Osman, frequent commenter here, he said, this is Deprogrammed Truther. I'm a father, grandfather, and I've realized how I've been misled through MSM and Trutherville eras. Not trying to be funny, but looking to create some kind of 12-step program to get credibility back with my family. They listened to me and believed me for years, but now that I've seen through my own bullcrap, I don't have the same credibility at home. Right. You got to undo. I explained to them the same as before, but it falls on deaf ears now. Example. I showed most of my family members the evidence accumulated before the first Trump shooting, and it didn't mean anything to any of them. No credibility anymore. I have rooted out belief and I have knowledge now, but this is useless if they don't believe me. Looking for advice, maybe somebody to put this together as a presentation. So a 12-step program, this kind of makes sense, and I did recommend that he check out Rick Ross, the cult deprogrammer, who has, and I posted a link to one of his videos on our server, because we are talking about a cult mindset. And one of the things about it, though, is that someone has to want to exit the cult. I don't think you can remove them from it. And I don't even think it's possible to reach people in the MSM box from this off-world stage perspective because they don't have any sort of framework to contextualize the information. They're totally submerged in the sea of irrelevance. And I think the way to approach this is to approach those who've already become skeptical to some degree. And in this case, it would be alt media. Alt media are the only people who are reachable. Mainstreamers are not. So my best advice is don't alienate the normies in your life. And a couple of other things here. So as far as credibility, like they don't believe me anymore. Yeah, you shouldn't want them to believe you. They should believe, or rather know how to find out what the truth is on their own. If you're still trying to be a source, or you're trying to replace the mainstream source, that's what alt media did. And that's a different type of media consumption. I would describe main and alt as passively consuming, as in their beaks are open for Big Brother to masticate the food and spit it in their mouths like little baby birds. And I kind of think it's better to get away from the habit of needing things to be spoon-fed. And this implies that the people that we're trying to wake up, they have to seek on their own. You're not going to wake up believers. And they're not going to believe you because you're not coming from the big screen. So if you're addressing people who view the screen as an opinion, you have to recall that this screen, the screened version of reality, takes precedence over their own perceptions. They believe everything. So you're looking at a religious cult, and it's not hyperbole to say so, it is a global doomsday cult. And if you believe the science, we are in the end times. So if you ever try to convert somebody out of their religion, then you'll understand what you're up against. And strategically, it makes more sense, and from a marketing perspective, because we're trying to create this third branch, we need that distinction. So strategically, it makes a lot more sense to focus on the people who've already begun to question these things on their own, and then they find themselves in that cul-de-sac, that pit, the alt media box, which is a subset of mainstream. But again, they're not closer to the truth, they're actually further from it. However, at least they're looking. They've risen above the apathy that typifies Normieville. So it makes more sense to focus on them. I'm not going to squander my attention and resources and time on non-thinkers, which is what believers are. And I don't think it's possible to convey the off-world stage perspective to somebody who's under MSM mediation. It just simply is not. You're dealing with superstitious minds and very compartmentalized minds. There's a philosophical crisis that we're confronting. And that's why I say what we're doing is not ideological, it's not political, but it's philosophical. So the only people you can reach are MSM Plus, and they will resist you. Remember how often we got pushed back on by chemtrailers and stuff. And in my opinion, most people are ego-driven, incurious, and arrogant, and often too self-centered to see the big picture. They can't admit they're wrong. And you have to start off by admitting, yeah, I have been misled. I was wrong about 95% of the stuff I thought I knew for sure. So if you look at any 12-step program, I think it begins when the person takes responsibility, they hit rock bottom. And the people who've hit rock bottom, the people who've reached a dead end with their present understanding of things with the mainstream go alternative. So they have somewhat broken free and they're reachable. So in principle, I'm against converting believers. I think we need to just, again, focus on those who have the situational awareness to have seen through it on their own. You wouldn't walk into a church and argue with people and try to disabuse them of their faith. Not only will they disregard you, but they'll probably become further entrenched. So at this stage, I don't believe there's any point to confronting that when there are so many people who've already figured out enough and can be reached. And the people that you can't reach right now are conformists. And as the parallel media grows, many of these conformists will feel safer exiting the big box. So I'm just taking the path of least resistance here, which I think it makes the most sense from a lot of different angles here. And the reason why they don't get it is they don't understand what media is. They don't understand that there is no meaningful distinction between mainstream news and the entertainment, all of which is part of the same worldview monopoly. I would argue that there's only one government, and it's, quote, global. And the news media, the government, the entertainment, these are all just basically departments within the big mind control operation. It is mind control. So the type of people you're trying to reach won't look in your direction until you have 10,000 people behind you, and then they're going to switch overnight. Easy converts, but it's premature. You can call them moral cowards or apathetic, whatever, but again, let them catch up on their own. My best advice out of principle and practicality is let's not proselytize to the incurious. But we are providing answers for people who are looking, and that's the whole point of Autohoax Con. Okay, catching up on comments. Joined by Autohoaxer, Dwayne Garrett. Nicotrama says, trying to convert someone out of their religion. It is a good analogy if you recognize that Gnostology, or the scientific paradigm, is a new religion. Its priesthood is the scientific priesthood, this priesthood of that reinforces the model, which isn't always the territory. So there's a big difference between lowercase and uppercase science. And then they have God constructs. Atheists believe in this very scary war god that we call the atom bomb, which is fake. It's a construct, but atheists believe in it. Atheists don't believe in God, but they believe in Gaia. And when I say atheists, I'm referring to those who adhere to the dominant scientific paradigm of Gnostology. They don't believe in heaven, but they believe in space. They don't believe in sin, but they believe in the virus. They believe in the injectable Eucharist. It's a religion, and it has God constructs, which I reject. And I think that is a good angle to approach this issue here, this problem, this philosophical crisis, is we have to recognize that their worldview is a religious paradigm. And by religious, I mean much of it is taken upon faith. Patricia Steer says, yes, people are in a cult, not in a Chief Crow way either. Yeah, and the term cult has very negative connotations, but I think you can make a distinction between positive or healthy and unhealthy cults, as you can with relationships. Not all relationships are bad, but you can make a pretty strong distinction about what constitutes a bad one. And it generally revolves around things like isolation and becoming the sole filter for one's experience. We're talking about like authoritarian control freaks. Okay, reverse history says, efficient strategy targeting those who have looked beyond the status quo. Yeah, see, I think there's a vacuum. I think there's a huge vacuum where atheism would belong, because atheism today has been repurposed and it's become a way of adopting the scientific paradigm. Look at Richard Dawkins. You know, he believes in all the God constructs. And his reasoning and his rationale for believing these things is the same that religious believers use for believing in their superstitions. So these are just modern replacements. It's a template thing. But additionally, I think there's a vacuum where, I mean, this is like just where skepticism would be. And it's not platformed. But in addition to that, I think objectivism, this philosophical outlook codified by Ayn Rand, it was never quite successful. It never became a real thing because it was always filtered through mainstream media. It was always put through the false model. So it's not a stretch to say that we are the only objectivists in the world. And I'm taking the approach that what we're attempting to do here is inject a great deal of skepticism, objectivism, and a rejection of these God constructs, a form of applied atheism, into the model. The Incompletist says, "Hey Tim, the sound is great. Bank International Settlement seems to be a controlling hand." Feel free to post links to anything you're referencing. Okay, let's move on. I want to go through my... There's quite a lot with that third assassination attempt yesterday. Apparently that's not what it was. It's been totally misrepresented. It was not an assassin. The guy was arrested. It seems like it might have been a psyop. Not quite sure. But here's a video of the assassin, would-be assassin, hanging out with Ivan Raiklin. Now, Ivan Raiklin is this goblin-looking individual. Raw took a really bad picture of him. Very unflattering. I don't know if that's tobacco in his mouth. And he's got his fingers up like a couple of devil horns. But here he is talking about how if they shoot Trump, they've got to think ahead the next 15 moves. They got to have a list of people so they can retaliate. This is something that's been talked about for some time.
War game, basically their next 15 moves. I got 30 moves ahead of it. Again, I'm doing worst case scenario, and if worst case scenario doesn't happen, we win, right? But I'm always planning for the worst case scenario that they can do both within their legal authority, and beyond of what they're capable of. So
Now, I'm just pointing this out that there's been a lot of predictive programming for this Trump thing. Everybody was calling it out before it happened, and a lot of it was internal. And they're setting the expectations for the people on the right. And then I came across something else, too. I've been suggesting for some time we're going to see the Turner Diaries, where the Tower of Babel falls, leave the world behind, white noise, the Tower of Babel being the West, megalopolis, the movie reiterates this entire theme, and that it's going to come from the MAGA. So here's the Rod of Iron Freedom Festival, where you had General Flynn, a major QAnon leader, and you had that church that worships the gun, and they have the leaders like the son of the cult of Sung Young Moon, the Moonies. So the Moonies have kind of, I don't know, managed to gather all this QAnon and all the MAGA fringe into this group called the Rod of Iron Freedom Festival, and they burned an effigy representing Babylon. So let me play this clip here. So the fact is here, the thing I'm pointing out is that the burning of Babylon is what Leave the World Behind is about. It's about the dissolution of the one language, the shared the shared space, the whole mission to outer space, International Space Station. That all has to go. So here we are looking at Rod of Iron Freedom Festival, and this looks like the Bohemian Grove. This looks like Burning Man. I mean, this is just pagan. Now they're moaning Amazing Grace. They're not singing it. They're moaning Amazing Grace around this big fire, and they're all wearing their red MAGA hats. So the Rod of Iron Festival, we're going to hear more from it, but the symbolism of burning Babylon is what stands out to me as very interesting. And if you want to call in on any of those topics, they are open. Here's an interesting observation from Leo Pirate. He said, "I'm not the only one who made the connection of Arthur Fleck, AF, America First, and Arthur Fleck being Joker. On my past streams, I pointed out how, in the first Joker, Arthur's stand-up comedy is mocked on Robert De Niro's late-night talk show. Psyops imitate art." So we've been talking about Nick Fuentes as being this incel Joker type who's really mad right now because nothing's going his way. He's mad at Trump. And Trump gave him a chance. He had dinner with Trump when he was Ye's campaign manager. But there's a parallel here where Nick Fuentes is being mocked on TV by Stephen Colbert.
Mar-a-Lago with Kanye West. Now, we know the dinner also included Holocaust denier Nick Fuentes. I can't imagine having dinner with someone so disgusting, and you have no idea which of those three guys I'm talking about.
Okay, now Nick Fuentes, Ye's campaign manager, America First, AF-16, he was there on 1/6 at the Capitol, yelling through a megaphone for his followers, the Groypers, the frog people, to run inside of the Capitol. He has not gone to jail for that because he's a Fed. He's an instigator. And I think right now he's representing grievance politics, far fringe right, the kind of which would motivate nuking Seattle or something, right out of the Turner Diaries. So that's where we're going. Now, there's something else here that's notable. So I was looking at this Vem Miller. Vem Miller was the guy that was accused of wanting to kill Trump at Coachella, who happens to be a good friend of Mindy Robinson. Mindy Robinson is likely a Fed, a plant, and what she does is she promotes the idea that people really died at the Harvest Festival. Now, the story doesn't add up because it was a poorly performed psyop like they all are, but her contention is that it was done by the deep state using a black helicopter. And I call her out on her lies. She's blocked me a few times, then she unblocks me because she's probably spying on me, but I've been trolling her lately, just saying, nobody died at this event. And she has people in her comments doing damage control. But she is a close friend and business partner with Vem Miller. Now, here's what she says. Vem had just exposed a deep state cover-up involving feds and the Bundy Ranch scandal, so I firmly believe this is 100% some kind of setup and retribution for exposing it. So what is the Bundy Ranch thing? So the Bundy Ranch thing, I think, is where we get into this anti-government sentiment, which is huge right now if you look at the stuff with FEMA, which we'll get to. So the Bundy standoff 2014 armed confrontation between supporters of Cliven Bundy and law enforcement following a decades-long dispute with the BLM having to do with grazing fees. So this is one of these intransigent, thick-headed sovereign citizens or something, some anti-government nut. And this is all a setup. We recently talked about the movie Rebel Ridge, which I think is a reference to Ruby Ridge, and it has to do with a one-man war against a racist police department. So there's a theme building up here. And then Trump kicks off his campaign in Waco. We've talked about all these various Waco scenarios, like, for example, on 4/19, Waco's anniversary, Trump's in court, and the guy sets himself on fire outside, like Dave Koresh was on fire. Trump kicked off his campaign in Waco the day after Netflix released Waco, American Apocalypse. So this is part of the story. And they were raided by the ATF over 1.6 million rounds. 1.6, January 6th, and this is where Alex Jones got his start. So here we have, I think, another Waco brewing. North Carolina Hurricane Recovery Team relocated amid threat of armed militia. Hurricane Helen, federal emergency workers were told to evacuate Rutherford County. Government emergency workers in the U.S. responding to devastation were relocated because of an armed militia that posed a threat. Likely feds, likely instigators, but this is the news, and I've been hearing this on a lot of leftist podcasts that chemtrail theorists have now evolved, they've become more extreme, and now they're threatening the weatherman for causing hurricanes. And now they're also going after FEMA, which is not new. One of the first conspiracy theories I debunked was FEMA coffins. If you still believe in FEMA coffins, those are called burial vaults, and they use them so that in cemeteries, the earth doesn't collapse when the coffin and implode on the coffin, but rather it protects the coffin and it protects the grounds. Okay, so yeah, Vem Miller, Ivan Raiklins on the Alex Jones Show spoke about the benefits of assassinating Trump. They've been hyping this up. They want it to happen. Did you see Trump today? He's like, I think it was, someone said, get up for this man. He had to stand up for some veteran or something, or some wife whose husband had died. He's at this rally, and he says, I'm having a hard time getting up ever since I was shot. This is Trump. I'm like, shot? You got your ear pierced. At worst. But yeah, he grudgingly got up on his feet to honor some deceased supporter. He's in his Biff Tannen phase. He doesn't care. And lest we forget, the ear wound was predicted with specificity in the Atlantic, the very location where his ear was clipped. I would have had a little more respect for Trump as a crisis actor if he had the tip of his ear surgically removed. But he did not. He didn't even bother with fake stitching or any kind of cosmetics, nothing. But the Atlantic predicted it. And then you had Time, where Trump is in trouble in the sandpit. There's a red flag behind him. And of course, this came out on 9/11, had suggested on some level that somebody knew that there would be an assassin at the golf course. So that's only 2 attempts. I don't think we can count today's. So here's the conspiracy theorist that... Okay, here we go. This is the guy from North Carolina. Man accused of threatening FEMA workers with assault rifle. Man accused of threatening FEMA workers with assault rifle in North Carolina. Now he's doing this because of Twitter grifters. He went out there with his gun. His name was something William Parsons. He went out there with his gun after the government because a bunch of shills on Twitter and crisis actors on Twitter are getting paid to demonize FEMA. All right, here is Roger Stone with the would-be assassin. What do you all make of this? Was it meant to be a convincing psyop and it got busted? Like last year at the same time, it was all about fake swattings. Now it's about fake assassinations. Joined by This Is Where It's At, Thirst for Truth. Diana South says, Rod of Iron appears in King James Version 4 times. Yeah, Rod of Iron, okay. Then there's these things called the Rods of God, these kinetic weapons. Which they could conceivably do, I believe. They could drop those. Make it look like it came from, quote, space. Kevin Mooring says, Autohoax is a thing these days. Well, it is in a way. The problem is the left wing will automatically be skeptical about the right and vice versa. It has to come from this third perspective or it doesn't work. Joined by David Hazel. Northern Girl says, hey everyone. Trump's going to have a rally at Madison Square Garden this month. Yeah, I heard people saying that he's trying to recreate some kind of Hitler rally. They're really hyping on the Hitler-Trump connection, which they did 8 years ago. Everything we're seeing right now is recycled. Does anybody have any expectation that this Diddy thing's going to come true? Elephant Tusk says, this whole thing seems like a bad sitcom series. Yeah, it's a never-ending reality TV show. And that's literally true. What we're witnessing is the control of time and the faking of history. That's what fake news is. It becomes fake history. The conquerors write history, and we have been conquered. So truthers, it's futile, give it up. You might as well just become skeptics of the whole affair and figure out how it works, because you can't win at this game. And the way that we are perceiving it as news is really more like a reality TV show. Yes, you get a lot of real news. Yeah, they tell you the sky's blue, you can trust them. But whenever it comes to historic events or these world stage dramas, it's likely it's pre-scripted and fake because they wrote our history like a script and now they're acting it out in the form of a terrible reality TV show. Donna South says, nothing burger Diddy. This is where it's at, says Diddy and timing, MAGA wet dream. Yeah, the timing of it is why I'm questioning it primarily. And then I saw in, I think it's called Monsters Ball, Diddy's in jail. And I'm not sure why, I haven't seen the movie. Zintrax says, truthers love planted rabbit holes. Yeah, exactly, they do. And I get it. You know, these stories are compelling if you assume that what you see on the screen is fundamentally real, but that the mainstream is lying. I mean, there's a lot of assumptions built into their whole worldview. Okay, here's an example. Western North Carolina update from someone who has boots on the ground. So here's a smiling crisis actress. Now take a look at this face. I'd call this Duper's Delight. And she talked to somebody whose best buddy was there. And she says that the death toll of 200 is not accurate, but it's actually 10,000. And her organization, because she's got an organization, according to her TikTok video, sent out 10,000 body bags, and they're requesting more. So this is also an old tactic. Back in the FEMA coffin days, they would say, oh yeah, they ordered 50,000 body bags. Even when I was in the military, body bag rumors were big. We're going to be deployed because they're ordering a bunch of body bags. I saw it on the supply, on the purchase order. It's not how it works. But anyway, here we go. This is someone telling us that there are 10, and she's not a crisis actress. This is real.
Whatever you think you know about Western North Carolina and what's going on over there, you're wrong, unless you're there. I've debated on if I even wanted to make this video because I don't really want to start a bunch of conspiracy theories or anything like that, but I do feel like word needs to get out about what is actually happening that news is not covering.
Okay, obviously this is a sales pitch, multiple takes, and what she finally gets down to is that there are 10,000 or more bodies and the government's hiding it.
Driving around and they're scared to ask for help. We've lost 2 Hispanic children to hypothermia in our community this week because they didn't know that help was out there for them.
How much are they getting paid? Someone had suggested to me that a lot of them are AI, which wouldn't shock me. I mean, it is that good. Kevin Mooring says, during COVID, body bags was a thing. Yeah, and the trucks filled up with bodies were a thing. You could hear the trucks, which, you know, and I have some firsthand information that debunks how those things, how they misrepresented the empty hospital thing. Like for example, you see the reefer trucks, you assume it's full of bodies and that the hospital's full. Well, no, it's likely that they shut off the internal morgues and use the external one. So they just made it public. Yeah, let's see what's on her shirt. Is it like crowds on demand? Okay, the cow who thinks he's a horse. That's what her shirt says. Okay. I just said crisis actor. Let's see if anybody agrees with me. Most of the people here are auto believers. They believe this stuff. Okay, Tim, check out your inbox. Okay, great. I'm still waiting on Stu Peters to reach out to me, but he did agree he wants to come on the show. Kevin Mooring says, did you see where Trump used Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket in his rally video? Now Kubrick's daughter says her late father would have backed Trump. Now that's funny. Vivian Kubrick, Scientologist. Full Metal Jacket, the subtext, Joker is JFK. He has the target on the side of his head. That's how I knew that Trump was going to get shot where the 45-47 is. I said that's a Kubrick tie-in, the Joker helmet. And Kubrick's daughter says her late father would have backed Trump. Yeah, her late father directed the Trump headshot. Her late father directed Apollo 11, the JFK assassination. Large parts of 2020, Kubrick was part of that. Not the only director. I mean, it would be incomplete to say Stanley Kubrick faked the moon landing. No, the PSYOP Entertainment Complex recruited him among many others. And there's plenty of examples we could point to, but it's more than just one person. Slick Rick says volume is louder than ever. Yeah, we fixed it last night. Zintrax says, remember the boat hospitals. Yeah, I remember for sure that there was this constant theme of mass graves, boats with bodies all over them, white hats in tunnels fighting the black hats, and the QAnoners spread a lot of the stuff back then. And it's not so different from saying Hell's Angels are on their way to Aurora to fight the Venezuelan gangs. We're seeing a lot of the same QAnon-like tactics, but they're not flaunting the whole Q thing. They're trying to hide the crazy. And I spell crazy with a Q. This is an interesting post. The cult that Mike Flynn had a... Oh yeah, this is the cult. So Mike Flynn had the Trump group, the MAGAs, chanting this prayer to the Archangel Michael, which is normal. It's normal for people in politics, for Republicans, gathering together to try to conjure angels. But this is it. This is called the Ascended Master K-17. I am one of heaven's gentlemen, of Saint Germain's dearest and best friends. So this is something from the I Am Temple. It was this, actually it's called the Church Universal Triumphant. And the Church Universal Triumphant believed that there is this war between the Black Brotherhood and the White Brotherhood. And this is brought back with the Q movement, with the white hats versus black hats. And just like the Q movement has all kinds of celebrities that they say fake died and are helping them from behind the scenes, this is what the Church Universal Triumphant is fundamentally about. The so-called Ascended Masters. Those who have left the earthly plane, mostly, but they stick around to help fight the black hats. So this is an example of just how the Q movement is a mashup of many different cults. And this cult, the Church Universal Triumphant, ended, well, it didn't end, but it had its heyday in the late 80s when its members all went into a bunker because they believed that China and Russia were going to nuke America. It didn't happen. And they say it's because they prayed so hard. So you can thank your local Universal Triumphant cultist for saving the world. They take credit for it. But here she is in 1984, Elizabeth Clare Prophet, chanting the prayer to the angels of the seven rays. And then here's also Michael Flynn chanting the same, and the QAnoners are taking the pledge.
I am present. I am here, O God, and I am the instrument of those sevenfold rays and archangels.
We are your instrument of those sevenfold rays and all your archangels.
Now, this is not from the Bible. This is from Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and that is her real name. Yeah, they actually do. They channel angels.
All of them.
And I will not retreat. I will take my stand. I will not fear to speak, and I will be the instrument of God's will.
And they channel the Ascended Masters. And I think this cult, which is likely a government construct, I think a lot of this was brought into the Q movement, where they're not really channeling in the usual sense, but they're using chans, 4chan, 8chan, to talk to this secret Ascended Master behind the scenes, the white hat. It's sort of a politicized version of the same story. But they're conjuring the Archangel Michael, and here's Flynn's people. Again, these are MAGAs.
We will not retreat. We will stand our ground. We will not fear to speak. We will be the instrument of your will. Whatever it is.
Whatever it is, even if it's storming the Capitol, even if it's drinking Kool-Aid and flying off to Haley Bop. I mean, this is insane. This is, again, General Flynn and the MAGA cult praying to the Archangel Michael. And I know it as I Am Temple because we had a local branch and I attended a couple of times. I did due diligence when it came to examining cults, and I came to this conclusion that all these various New Age cults have the same core tenets. It's like a hydra, many different heads, but it's essentially the same thing. But I agree with this person's take on it, that this individual, Mike Flynn, is part of a big cult, which is a doomsday cult. That's the main takeaway. It's a doomsday cult. And its members were convinced that China and Russia were about to bomb them, and so they went into bunkers and they gave all their money to a cult.
In your name. And the name of your legions. We are freeborn. And we shall remain freeborn.
All right, anyway, they're praying to legions. Can't be good. Okay, let's see here. Armin Reese says, Tim, you should listen to Pronosis with Cubstar and Silas. Some connections were made with Kamala Harris, Trump, and the nuke you might find relevant. Yeah, I'll take a look. Diana Sal says, maybe Kubrick produced the Trump assassin flick from the grave. Well, I think this is the thing. Kubrick didn't direct Apollo 11. He directed the 20th and 21st century. And I think what we're looking at is, in broad strokes, they tell the story. And we see it in movies. We see the preparation for it. But the story's already written. 33 years after it's built, it's going to be pulled. And then 13 years later, on 11/3, the one tower is going to go up. And these changes are going to happen. So they have what I call the Metascript. And I think he's one of the chief Metascriptors. Like he probably wrote down, 8:46 a.m. as Mercury's rising, first plane hits. 77 minutes after taking off, Flight 77 hits the 77-foot tall building called the Pentagon. Building 7 burns for 7 hours and then falls in its own footprint in 7 seconds. I mean, when you get into it, it has all the hallmarks of being scripted and fake and staged, but somebody had to write it. And that's what we're interested in. That's what we're often doing, is we're trying to find out who wrote it. Who are the Metascriptors? And we have a pretty good idea. Elephant Tusk says, Michael is actually Satan's brother. That's interesting. Michael and Satan, brothers. Never heard that before. I know that Lucifer and Jesus both add to 74 in Gematria, according to one of many calculators you can choose. Plain Decoded says, Legion in the Bible was the demons in the pigs that were cast out. Okay, so here's a rabbit trail, because you can't separate Flynn from any of this stuff. You know, he trademarked digital soldiers. So QAnon is a mashup of Q and Anonymous, the hacktivist group. And what is the hacktivist group's slogan? We are Legion. So here you have it, Anonymous, we are Legion. So you combine Q and Anon, you get Q Anonymous. There might be some connection here. It's almost like Q's some kind of controlled opposition run by the very people they pretend to oppose. And a literalist said Santa is Satan's brother. I think there might be something to it. I've heard a few things like this. Although I think they might be conflating Krampus with Satan. But there is something to it. The Megalopolis movie had a celebration of Saturnalia where Elvis performed. And he sang Donald Trump's inauguration song while wrapped in an American flag. Very strange times. Elephant Tusk says, notice all these angel names end in L. Yeah, doesn't it mean like shining or something in this context? Or messenger? But yeah, Gabriel, Mike, they all have the same. And you'll notice when they chant, like Elizabeth Clare Prophet, they enunciate each syllable in a very specific way. But the Michael Satan thing is kind of interesting because the various books on traditional ritual magic assigns angels to the 4 cardinal directions, north, east, south, and west, and Michael is associated with the south. But the Satanists associate Satan with the south. And I noticed that the left-hand path and the right-hand path, as in like Wicca, Satan, New Age, and the darker stuff, their rituals are similar in structure, but they just swap out the names. So it doesn't make a difference, in other words. So if they're doing group magic in that stadium there, they might just as well be invoking Satan. Not that I believe in Satan literally. I'm just saying that it doesn't make a difference. Even if you read their literature, it's interchangeable. So here's a post from They're Already Here on Twitter I found today to be interesting. Just a few little clues. So we're looking at a close-up. This is from The Shining. So a lot of people figured out that The Shining has predictive programming for Apollo 11. No, not predictive. It's actually after the fact. That The Shining reveals that Kubrick was involved in producing the Apollo 11 hoax. But it also has foreshadowing for the September 11th attacks. There's more for September 11th in The Shining than there is for Apollo 11, I would argue. Well, here is the mother and the actress. What is her name? She recently died. Seemed like a really nice lady. She's reading, and she said that Kubrick, I think they really scared her. I got to read some of her interviews about the working environment. The Catcher in the Rye. She's reading The Catcher in the Rye, which was the book that Mark Chapman was reading, and he's the one who killed Lenin. The Catcher in the Rye, I believe it was Saran. Did he have it as well? Let me double check that. And he was supposedly hypnotized or something. Okay, 1951 novel Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. And it's been associated with mind control because of Chapman. And I think he might have had it as well. I have to double check. It's a popular book among assassins, is my point. And I listened to this podcast by Joseph Atwill, author of Caesar's Messiah. And he did a breakdown of this, and he suggested that the reason why this book was in the hands of John Lennon's assassin is that it has some kind of code in it. And he broke it down and suggested that the book reveals that the world is in the grip of a secret society that routinely murders its enemies in artful ways and leaves its signature. And so this book is considered to be a signature that it was a Masonic hit. So if like someone's killed and this book's in the possession of the assassin, you know, it kind of suggests that, okay, this is a meaningful prop. John Hinckley Jr. was inspired by Taxi Driver, and some said that Oswald was inspired by the Frank Sinatra film Suddenly and the Manchurian Candidate. So the idea of predictive programming is not new. They've been using it since the very beginning because it's always been about news bending. News has always been fake. Phoniness is the most famous expression from Catcher in the Rye. Interesting tidbit there. The use of the word phoniness. So now this goes one level deeper because it's in the movie The Shining, and Stanley Kubrick, in all likelihood, shot JFK. It wasn't Oswald, and it was a movie. So here you have another level of it, phoniness, the assassin's signature in a Kubrick film. Shelley Duvall, that's right. She died on 7/11. Thank you for that. Conscious Reality, CD. Tominoid says, Mel Gibson conspiracy theory has Catcher in the Rye. Jack comes at Wendy with a bat. Plain Dakota says, if you have time to share my Mets video, it's 7 minutes long. Okay. We have some sports predictive programming. Now, the movie The Shining is, it's Kubrick. But it's long been the subject of speculation that, yeah, Stanley Kubrick wanted to tell us that he felt bad for tricking us. He was compromised. Like, he's like one of us. No. That is not the point. This was not a reveal. And Stephen King wrote the book The Shining, and the sequel, Doctor Sleep, features a character who predicts 9/11, further solidifying The Shining 9/11 predictive programming connections. Okay, I'm running through my notes. Again, if you want to be involved in Autohoax Con number 2, I put the flyer out there. Just send me a message and we'll see what you want to do. And we did have a request from Deprogrammed Truther. If anyone has any concept for a 12-step deprogramming, a 12-step program to break away from the main and alt media box. Sounds like an interesting outline, a good concept. Yeah, King supposedly hated the original Shining movie. The points of interest are where the movie diverged from the book, where there was an ulterior message, something else that wasn't from King's version put into it. Yeah, so Joe Rogan follows me on Twitter. I don't know why. I wasn't following him until today. So I went ahead and I sent him a message. And I said, go ahead and invite me on your show since you followed me. And he's following 3,000 people, so I don't feel special. But I did think it made sense. You know, if you're going to follow me, if you're listening, you might as well. I mean, it couldn't be that bad. I've heard him recently making some pretty decent and well thought out arguments in favor of the moon landing being a hoax. Now, he doesn't go so far as to say the Earth is flat and NASA lies about everything, but he went with the, I think, establishment-friendly version, the new version, the fly me to the moon version. So that's one point in his favor. Obviously, he's still a New World Order shill, but I said, hey, Joe, I just followed you back. I assume you want to have me on as a guest. Just DM me. I did watch his special, and I have seen some of his comedy. Did anybody else watch it? I find it interesting because these jokes are tailor-made for a certain demographic. It just reminds me of how comedy almost seems like a way of wrangling people according to their political opinions, and almost as a limited hangout, floating banned ideas and then controlling them. Danny wears the Danny in The Shining wears the Apollo shirt, and then he throws the darts in the room next to the phone booth, and the phone booth represents the bell. There's the building. In fact, I have a link to it. Since we're talking about Stanley Kubrick, one of the directors of the century we live through, and the present one. So the last, I would say since the 60s, maybe since Dr. Strangelove came out, and on that day, Kennedy died. That's how far back Kubrick had been working on this big metascript. So here's an example of predictive programming in The Shining. Here's Danny zooming down the hallway on his tricycle, and there you have the twins. Now, the grown-up twins were at the Queen's funeral recently, and they were posing in front of the Twin Tower Bridge. Very interesting connections here. So he sees them psychically ripped apart on the ground, fireman's axe, and an upside-down chair. Blood everywhere. So it's this horrific scene as he zooms past him. And this is compared by Chartword to Ground Zero. The fireman axe, the upside-down chair, it all creates the same kind of vibe. Next scene, he's throwing darts. The darts emphasize the projectiles of 9/11, the airplanes. And then the phone booth in the back, it's a bell, and there's the twins. So the twins and the bell phone booth. So how does this connect? Next to the Twin Towers, you have the Bell telephone tower. So he's throwing darts past by the twin girls who have just been depicted as dead on the ground, adjacent to this phone booth. So this is just another one of these connections. And I have many more as we go down the line here, just kind of reinforcing that The Shining has foreshadowing in many different scenes. And this is also worth noting, the Millennium Hilton Hotel. Down there at Ground Zero, you have a hotel designed to look like Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Monolith. And it was overlooking the devastation. So now in 2001 A Space Odyssey, you have a scene where they're uncovering a monolith on the moon. And you look at the ramps for access, and then you compare that ramp for access to Ground Zero, where you have the Millennium Hotel in the back. So in other words, Kubrick, according to this article, was subconsciously programming all of us for the idea that there would be a mass media ritual executed on the movie screen, and that this would, according to this site here, this would begin our inner space odyssey and a rebirth into a new age. And I happen to agree with this assessment. Like the moon landing, and these are all Kubrick things, the moon landing, 9/11, 2020, these things all synchronized mankind, put us all on the same sheet. Here's another example, iconic image of Flight 175 speeding towards the South Tower. Now, 2001 Space Odyssey, of a space plane approaching the twin-wheeled space station. Interesting connection there. And Dr. Strangelove, low-level attack mission, rogue airplane. Looks like the Pentagon. There's plenty more here. Just scratching the surface. Stanley Kubrick, it would be erroneous and misleading to say that he got co-opted to help NASA fake the moon landing. No, it's much bigger than that. And by the way, Fly Me to the Moon had multiple references to Kubrick. There's even a bit of foreshadowing in Full Metal Jacket. And that's a whole other breakdown, but Full Metal Jacket is Joker is JFK. Tremendous amount of dust created by the collapse of the Twin Towers necessitated that the first responders wear protective masks. So he connects the masks to Eyes Wide Shut. And this article came out before 2020. And I think we could even add the masks and the concept of Eyes Wide Shut when it comes to propaganda, the censorship agenda. I think it's all tied in here. And the clockwork orange image that I often have on the screen kind of reiterates all of this, that the subconscious has just been eyes wide shut, and they have been downloading all this imagery into our collective psyche for our entire lives. And this is MK Ultra writ large. They just program the collective psyche, and then as a monolith, as a hive mind, we respond. Another remarkable aspect of the staged event is the way it, quote, looked like something out of a movie. Prior to September 11th, Hollywood released Godzilla, Armageddon, Deep Impact, Independence Day, all featuring elaborate special effects showing iconic buildings such as the WTC being destroyed. 2001 contained groundbreaking special effects by Kubrick, and he got his Oscar Academy Award for Visual Effects. So this answers the question of fakeability. And anything they can fake in the movies, they can fake in the news. It is that simple. They do it all the time. Observing Reality says you'd be a good guest on Rogan. Yeah, we'd have to have some parameters. You know, I wouldn't want to be lumped in with like anti-vax, chemtrail, phobic, 5G, conspiracy theorists. Like we're better than that. We're not QAnon. And I'm not even you couldn't call me a quote flat earther just because I know NASA's fake. Elephant Tusk says, I believe I understand the whole twin symbolism and what it references. I would be interested to hear your take on the meaning of the Twin Towers sinking. I have a few different interpretations. One of it, I think that it correlates to the sinking of the Titanic as a metaphor for the death of the West. And that the Twin Towers is the second part of this, but that it's a story told over time. Megalopolis hinted at this. Even in the trailer, it said that empires don't fall overnight, and you know that it takes a long time. And then it's when people cease believing in the empire. And I kind of think that the space station and the one world unity it represents, that's the next part that has to fall. That's one level. But then there's another aspect to it. I think the two towers being replaced by one is a reference, and the monolith at Ground Zero, to the two worlds merging into one. The news world, the one they project through news media, and the entertainment. And the synchronization of these two, the synchronizing of the entertainment and the news media, is how they achieve this monolithic one world view. There's a worldview monopoly. It's the new monotheism. It's the world as curated by Big Brother. And we're all agreeing upon Big Brother's version of events just by default. And the truthers know something's up. So they add on to it. They look for more information, not knowing they're being spoon-fed alternative fakery. Okay, I'm catching up on your comments. If you want to recommend anyone for the Autohoax Con number 2, just send them this flyer. I'm going to put a link below. Last time we had 3 speakers. I'd like to have 4, 5, 6. Maybe 1 every hour. However many we get, and we will make room. If you have a podcast to promote, music or art or memes or anything you think at all that you want included, just feel free to hit me up. And this is likely going to be a monthly event. Yeah, I think it's helpful to look at this one world religion as the new monotheism. And it has its own God constructs. It's a replacement religion. But by monotheism, I mean it's like the one agreed upon state-sanctioned version of reality that everyone abides by. Okay, let's see here. So we already talked about the armed man arrested near Trump rally. That was a huge nothing burger. Okay, so there's a post here by someone called Phoenix Peace Love. And this is a common misunderstanding of predictive programming and one of the things that we're working on fixing. And what he says is, in their belief system, and here's how we got here. He's showing a video of Justin Bieber hanging out with P. Diddy and how it seems like it was foreshadowed in The Simpsons. So this is an example of predictive programming. It's a TikToker and he's making a bunch of dumb faces. He's not the victim. He's just reacting to these coincidences. Okay, just a ridiculous TikTok theme song. So you're looking at here, there's P. Diddy, there's Bart. Bart's given a mic, he gets a record deal, he's performing, and now they're comparing Bart and the White Party to Diddy's White Party. And it goes on and on for 2 minutes. Was The Simpsons connection to Diddy's prophetic or what? And this is posted by Juanita Broderick. And my response to this is, because what they say is this. This is what Phoenix said. They have to tell you what they're going to do, or they'll be bitch slapped by karma. If they tell you in their TV shows and sitcoms and movies, then it absolves them of any wrongdoing. This is a common misconception. I think it largely stems from synchromystics and InfoWars, and it was stolen from Michael Hoffman, who believes that everything that happens in the news is real. That's one of his flaws, but other than that, his research is impeccable. But the issue here is they're claiming that in order to get a pass from so-called karma, which doesn't exist in the way they're describing, that the bad guys tell us what they're going to do in the future, and somehow they're able to get away with it. Well, it doesn't really work that way. It's a silly explanation. So I said, no, predictive programming is just a form of propaganda, marketing, conditioning, advertising for future fake events. You have no evidence of their belief system regarding karma. But I go through here, and many people say this. Many people run to this explanation. And this is a misunderstanding. I mean, they're right in noticing stuff, but their interpretation is off. They mystify it. And I'm working here on demystifying. Now take a look at this. A lot of people are talking about the Baron Trump Time Traveler book, and they're referencing the author Ingersoll Lockwood, how he looks just like the guy that did the Cyber Symposium. So if you remember, the Cyber Symposium had this guy in front of the American flag, disheveled hair, beard. He looks like the author Ingersoll Lockwood, who wrote those Baron Trump Time Traveler books. So people thought he was a time traveler. Others thought he was JFK Jr., but they all thought he's some kind of magic character who's come into the world to save us from the deep state. And let me bring up an image of Ingersoll Lockwood, because this is not a coincidence. I'm just showing you how they're messing with the heads of the truthers. They're leading them down these trails. So like, wow, time traveler who wrote the time travel book about Baron Trump is speaking at a cyber symposium with a pillow guy, and they're going to wake up the world. You see the resemblance? So you could be forgiven for thinking that Professor Clemens here is either Ingersoll Lockwood or JFK Jr. in a costume. This is where they lead these believers. And this is sort of a myth they create. Elephant Tusk says that guy's from Las Cruces. Yeah, he is. But not only that, but look. Before Q, he didn't look like that. He was clean shaven, short hair. And then he got involved with Q, and they said, hey, we got a role for you. You're going to do the Cyber Symposium. You're going to hype up this Barron Trump thing. Let's have you look like this guy. So it's a costume. Professor Clemens is cosplaying as Ingersoll Lockwood for the confusion of QAnoners. And then he was there at the Cyber Symposium where hopium was at an all-time high. General Michael Flynn was asked if he would stand at the head of a military tribunal at the Rod of Iron Freedom event.
And what you had to endure. Is there any chance that should the election go in a positive result, you would get your rank reinstated and sit at the head of a military tribunal to not only drain the swamp, but imprison the swamp, and on a few occasions, execute the swamp?
So people cheer and laugh when he says, execute the swamp. And of course, General Flynn says, LOL, yes.
I speak to around this country, and for years now, for the last 4 years.
He doesn't even shy away from it. He doesn't play it down very much. But yeah, General Michael Flynn did say he would sit at the head of a military tribunal to drain the swamp, imprison the swamp, and on some occasions execute the swamp. Little bloodthirsty there. Diana South says Colonel Sanders. Yeah, he didn't look like Colonel Sanders before this thing. It's such a scam. The Q movement is a huge scam. I liken it to a Ponzi scheme, but you have to invest all of your social capital, all of your social media, all your influence. You just throw it all in, because at the end of the day, there's going to be a great awakening, and you will have the ability to tell all your friends and family, I told you so. Jim Stewart says, 13 months ago, Mike Flynn, we've been talking about him a bit tonight, began programming Trump's supporters for the assassination. The PSYOP has been relentless and nonstop, and it's to put the idea into as many heads as possible. Michael Flynn predicts assassination attempts on Trump. Let me go ahead and play this clip. Yeah, and this guy's right about it. He's correct that they're hyping it up. He's wrong if he thinks they're going to do it for real. They hype up the fakery. This is the standard thing. That's another thing, too. For the people who think that predictive programming is used to avoid karma, they're not incurring bad karma with fake events. They're not really killing people. So you can go ahead and dispense with that. Someone took this picture of the super heavy Raptor. This is the super heavy booster with 33 Raptor engines. Does anybody know how fast you have to go to escape the Earth, to escape the material realm? What is the speed if you go on runway 33 there in Florida at Kennedy Space Center? How fast do you have to go in your rocket ship? What is the escape velocity? You want to escape this realm. Yep, it is Mach 33. What is the significance? It's all allegory for higher states of consciousness. It's not about going to space. It's about going to higher states. Again, space is a metaphor for the space between your ears. The space program is to control that space, your mind. And behind all of the rocketry and the science, what you really have is a Egyptian mystery school. It's esoteric. 33 engines refers to the vertebrae, the Kundalini serpent, the rising of consciousness to ascend from the material realm to the celestial. And that's why Mach 33 is the speed you must go to exit the material plane. It's all Masonic allegory. NASA is a Egyptian mystery school, Mystery Babylon, fertility, cult. It's basically nature worship, and it has a priesthood that seems to understand something about consciousness and reincarnation. Yeah, if you want to call on Discord, I'll go ahead and open that up. We just had episode 2 of the IPS Deep Think Tank, and I want to say thanks to Armin Ree for processing those files. So if you go into the Discord server, and if you haven't been there before, I'm going to put this on the screen for you. So you go into the Discord server and you hit IPS voice chat. That's simple. You just click there, and when you want to talk, unmute your mic. Very simple. So if you're not in America, if you can't call... Hey, what's up, Armin Reed? Hey, thanks again for processing the episode 2.
Hey, no problem. No problem. Okay, I advised you or suggested that you listen to the prognosis episode with Cubstar because it has some connections, but I can actually talk about the connections over here, saving time from everyone. Of course, you can still listen.
Sure.
Am I coming through all right?
Yeah, loud and clear. And yeah, please fill everybody in on the prognosis episode with Cubstar. I haven't heard that one yet.
Yeah. Well, first of all, going a bit back, when you were talking about The Shining, Jack Torrance, the character, the full name is John Daniel Edward Torrance. So if you remove Daniel, he's Jet, Jet. So the jet that killed the twins, right? Anyway, that was just a side note to add to that whole predictive programming about 9/11 through The Shining, right?
Right.
Hello?
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry. I was just muted for a second there. Yeah, that's likely they're intentional. I mean, there's nothing in any Kubrick flick that is unintentional. Recently, I was looking at the whole orange tang, the whole orange juice thing, which is a huge clue in all these things because they sent tang into space. But yes, you're right. If there's anything in Kubrick's films, it likely has a meaning to it. So I'll look into that, but I didn't know that was Jack Torrance's name. All work make no play, make Jack a dull boy.
Yeah. And he's always been the caretaker there. That's the final message. He even appears in the photographs. Anyway, moving forward. So one of the things, this is all, credits to Cubstar. Remember when I showed you that 2 of the main stars in Andromeda were the name of Kamala Harris backwards, right?
Yes.
Now, right. So Kamala Harris representing Andromeda, which is the chained woman, the chained maiden. Now, Cubstar filled in that myth further. And what he said was Andromeda was the daughter of Cassiopeia, who is usually associated also with Athena, which is the goddess of civilization. So we could consider this the West, or the civilized world. And she voluntarily offered herself as a sacrifice to the Kraken, or Cetus, which would be Trump, to save the civilization, in this case, to save the kingdom, right?
Athena.
Now, another interest...
Okay, Athena is and this might be relevant, she's the patron of Odysseus in the Odyssey. She's sort of his guide. She takes, and she likes him because he's crafty and all that, and she appears to him. And right now we're looking at the Calypso capsule, having these 2 astronauts stranded in their little space Odyssey. So I've been kind of on the lookout for any kind of connections to the Odyssey as it might pertain to this Boeing mission, which has kind of gone awry. So it's interesting to hear Athena here brought up. But go on.
And so, and note how Cassiopeia links also to the Empress tarot card. She's the sitting queen, if you look at the constellation. So that's relevant too. I think the connection to the civilized world is there. So in the myth, she voluntarily offers herself as a sacrifice to Cetus or the Kraken. The two names are for the same thing, which, as you know, has been linked with Trump, right? Now, the way that she is actually saved from the sacrifice is that Perseus uses the head of Medusa to turn the Cetus or the Kraken to stone and kill the Kraken and therefore save Andromeda. Now, the interesting thing here that I've, in the meantime, discovered through Silas is that Perseus comes from the root in the Greek mythology the name Persia comes from the root of Perses, which was the son of Perseus and Andromeda, right?
Okay.
So Persia is Iran, right? And the head of Medusa that turns everything to stone is the nuke, right? In the mythology, let's say, in our current mythology. So it's interesting that the whole conflict narrative in the Middle East is around Iran, around the nuke. And it could be the tool used to defeat the monster, in this case, the Cetus monster, the Trump, right? And bring Andromeda as now the unchained Kamala Harris. So she's now unchained. She offered herself as sacrifice and was saved by Perseus or Persia through the head of Medusa. And she's now unchained to proceed with civilization. So Cassiopeia or Athena, right? So that was what I wanted to present.
Interesting take here. And for those who don't know, what are the names of the stars that spell Kamala Harris if you read them backward?
It's exactly the backward name, Alamak and Sirah.
Yep.
And then there's other stars, but yeah.
Okay, well, Biden just earlier today said that he warned Iran that killing Trump would be an act of war. So there's that statement brought up recently. And I kind of think that the last shooter's name, Ryan, is conveniently, anagrammatically, a reference to Iran. And he was the one on the golf course. And if you recall, Iran put out a video with a drone killing Trump on a golf course. So there's something up here, definitely, that you've picked up on. And does this suggest to you that this is preordained, predetermined, that there's no point in voting because Kamala is going to win? Or do you think it's something else?
Well, I'm not saying about the result of the election, because it could well be that Trump wins. And so she is, in that sense, almost sacrificed to the Kraken. And then she is saved. So it depends.
I see.
But what it seems obvious is that it's following the myth. You understand? So the narrative applied onto the world stage is seemingly following the myth of Andromeda, Cassiopeia, Cetus, and Perseus.
Yeah, great connections. Great connections. You got something good here with the Kraken too, because you're right. For those who don't know, the Kraken thing has been consistently tied in with the beast of the sea, Apollyon. Then of course you have Abaddon, and then the Destroyer. And then you had, of course, Oppenheimer referring to the atom bomb as the Destroyer. And then you had Robert De Niro outside the courthouse calling Trump a destroyer who would destroy everything. So this is all a recurring theme. Terminator, Destroyer, Kraken. It all pertains to Trump and what he represents, the destruction from the far-right domestic extremists incoming.
Yeah.
Incoming.
And the connection here that I think it's also fitting to the whole story is Perseus, Persia. So Persia, Iran, right? And the whole situation right now in the narrative is around Iran and, of course, Israel, but Iran plays the leading role there as the opposition, right? So Iran is, note how years back the whole situation was about Iran acquiring nuclear weapons, right? The narrative. And the nuclear weapon would be the head of Medusa, right? That turns everything into stone, that not even the gods can look at Medusa because they will be turned into stone. So the Medusa is like the ultimate, the head of the Medusa, the gaze of Medusa is like the ultimate weapon, right? And Persia acquired the nuke, right? Acquired the Medusa and will use it in the myth, if it follows the myth, will use it, of course, we're talking narrative here, will use it to defeat Cetus, to defeat the Kraken, to defeat Trump, and save Andromeda, which in this case would be Alamak Sirah or Kamala Harris. That would probably be brought forth as the unchained now. Now she's no longer under the shadow of Biden or under the shadow of Trump or under, it's like the released woman in that sense that will take the seat of her mother Athena, right? Her mother Cassiopeia or Athena, right?
Well, from a
So that's
predictive programming standpoint, you have the movie Civil War, where Trump's in office and there's a war over it. And then you have a character who I think represents Kamala Harris, who has to take him out. And then you have the DMZ, another movie where it's a civil war, and you have this Kamala. So she's a very important character, whether she wins or not. And if it's contested, then she won to her people. So this could also work. I think it could work out either way. I happen to think, based on World Wrestling Entertainment, that MAGA wins. Because if you remember, it was Umaga beat Kamala. And Kamala, the wrestler, his real last name happens to be Harris. So it's written in the Metascript, and it's reflected throughout that she is a player here. Even if she doesn't win, I think it still works if we're talking about a schism. And one more thing, anytime the Kraken has been mentioned, it's always been referencing, I think, this schism, the Kraken, everything, the left-right paradigm designed to eventually reach some kind of crescendo. And I think the Kraken references like the fault line possibly in Seattle, but it's phonetically the sound, the name Kraken, it means multiple things in addition to possibly some kind of weapon.
Yes, and note also, if I may, in the narrative, there has been, two, maybe three, whatever you want to consider this last one, attempts on the Kraken, on Trump, right? And so Trump is seemingly indestructible. He can't be killed by normal weapons because he has the armor of God or whatever that the QAnon propagates around him, right? But he can only be destroyed by the head of Medusa in the myth, right? So he can only be taken out by, in this case, a nuke that removes him from, how that will play out. Of course, we're speculating here. But that the main character that applies the head of Medusa is Perseus or Persia, which is now involved heavily in the game, has been for years, but now particularly involved in the geopolitical game.
They're being scapegoated in advance for this. And Isabel Ann said, Medusa is Elgol. The Mars-Jupiter conjunction before Trump's ear piercing was on Elgol. So she had mentioned this that day in the chat. She said, this particular star is in this place, and it would be, I guess, it would make sense for this to be the time that they pull the trigger. And shortly after that, as in like 5 minutes later, Trump gets his head wound. And Let's Go says, Kamala is constantly talking about being unburdened. Maybe meaning unchained.
Yes, the chains. Yeah.
Good observation there. I agree.
The chains. Yeah.
All right. Well, overall, very interesting observations here, and I'm definitely looking closely at this one here because I do think we can make correlations here between the zodiac, the myths, as well as the contemporary movies for guessing, or not guessing, but reading what's in store for the next major plot twist, the next scene.
Yeah, exactly. And this seems to be very, very relevant to what is concurrently being applied on the world stage. So I decided it would be better just to present it over here.
Well, feel free to
Anyway,
post a link. Yeah, post a link to that podcast, and I'll be sure to share it.
Okay.
So I appreciate you calling in and filling us in on this, and we'll look forward to listening to the
All right.
podcast. Thanks again.
Okay, we'll stay in touch. See you.
I see Rabbit 87.7 is in the voice chat. Were you just listening in, or did you have something to comment on? Going once, going twice. All right, phones are still open, 505-510-4226. Donald Trump compared to Hitler after vowing to invoke 1700s law used to justify Japanese internment camps. Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Interesting. I just kind of noted this one because you have to see how illegal aliens and extraterrestrial aliens are both enemies of the far right. They're anti-aliens. They don't care if you're from Mars or Mexico. I'm like, that's not a coincidence. They've taken xenophobia to a whole new level. Immortal L says, great caller. Oh, yes, and he's going to be a speaker at the next Autohoax Con, so you do want... And that one's going to be live. I mean, I am going to have a Zoom for those who want to participate, but it is going to be live, so no one's going to miss it. The Incomplete says, what's happening with Beetlejuice? I thought Trump was playing that character in... Oh, interesting. Yeah, I saw something with the star Beetlejuice earlier this year, and in the movie, Trump does make an appearance. He's just sort of walking through the waiting room in the netherworld in a gold suit, and he has the American flag lapel pin. It's undeniably him. Okay, I'm scrolling through. We talked about the Rod of Iron Freedom Festival, General Flynn, Church Universal Triumphant, Worshipping Legion, Summoning Angels, and Burning Babylon. Great way to spend the weekend. Talked a bit about phoniness, Catcher in the Rye, Stanley Kubrick, and Vivian Kubrick, who's a Scientologist, which is interesting considering, of course, Tom Cruise, and Eyes Wide Shut, which came out on the day JFK Jr. died. So you look at Kubrick, Dr. Strangelove comes out 11/22/63. JFK dies. Eyes Wide Shut, his final movie, comes out. JFK Jr. dies. The timing of his movie releases are clues. And there's a clue in the movie Eyes Wide Shut that would suggest that Kubrick wasn't dead, that he faked his death. Now, obviously, he's not alive now. He'd be too old. Unless he has a med bed, like JFK. But, in reality, he likely retired from the public at that time and maybe devoted his time and attention to his magnum opus, which is, of course, 9/11. Now, this is sort of a side topic, but I just had a question for... So I'm on Twitter, so I'm constantly seeing white replacement theory types. And so I said, I have a serious question for the white genocide people. How did they know they weren't black in their past life, or that they won't be black in their next life? Because that entire worldview of some kind of racial purity or ethnofascism rests upon intra-racial reincarnation. It's a built-in presumption. It wouldn't make sense otherwise. If we're not reincarnating in the same, quote, race every single life, then none of their arguments matter or make any sense. You can't really defend it. And I'm just noting there's a lot of this type of rhetoric, and there's one individual who said, something about our ancestors, and I'm like, I don't know. Not really sure. I think there's some kind of fallacious reasoning in here. I mean, reincarnation throws everything for a loop. Okay, let's move on here. Phones are open, 505-510-4226. Another day, another fake assassination attempt. We talked about Moonies and the Rod of Iron cult. Tons of crisis actors. And look, this is Lord Loomer saying, the people in Appalachia should not comply with FEMA. Well, then don't take the $750. This is a matter of survival. Do not comply with FEMA. Like, from the safety of her basement, wherever she's at, she's tweeting this out, telling people, rise up, fight the government. It's so predictable, this talking point. FEMA's going to kill you. This is old InfoWars trash. But here they are, making it go viral, and then they have these likely fake stories of apparently militias rising up against the FEMA personnel, which I think this is a setup. And based on the way it's being talked about in the left leaning podcasts, I think they're setting up some kind of narrative like they had in 2020, where the truthers, the conspiracy theorists, are causing real harm in the world. That they've crossed the line from just asking questions to incitement. And that's going to be another thing that's going to use the public is going to accept as a pretext for acquiescing to censorship. They're not going to censor us by force. They're going to get the sheeple to agree that we need it. The masses who do not use critical thinking when it comes to mass media are going to say, yeah, we have to be censored for our own sake. And it's because they're all mind AIDS patients and they're susceptible to mind viruses. Being inoculated, I am not worried about these things. I don't need to mask my mind, but that's what's coming. In chess, white and black are bitter enemies, but those who move the pieces are usually good friends. Interesting meme I saw today. Made me think of Andrew Tate, whose father's a master chess player in CIA, and he's always playing chess when he's not grooming youth at Tater Tot University or trafficking and abusing women. And I think it's a tell. It's a giveaway. And I don't believe that Andrew Tate is a real person. He's a parody of extremism. And I say this because just as he's getting in trouble with the law, the movie Speak No Evil comes out, which is openly based on him in large part. Jacques says, I went to COVID protests in 2020 thinking people would be like people here. I was sorely disappointed. Yeah, I noted that the instant you had a lot of big name alt media types getting in front of the anti-lockdown, that it was game over. And, there's a lot of characters out there who are charismatic, slick production, but they all feed into alt media, which is the accepted counter-narrative. And when I say accepted, I mean acknowledged. Acknowledged. Anti-vax gets banned, but it's acknowledged. It's part of the paradigm. The skeptical position is not even acknowledged. It's not platformed. And that's where we come along. We are specifically and only opening this platform for those who have reached a sufficient level of skepticism when it comes to the argument from authority presented by the monolith. And I was addressing this comment earlier where someone had asked me about how can you wake people up in your family? How can you get people who don't believe you to look at this? And I'm suggesting look into Rick Ross's cult deprogramming tactics, because it's a big endeavor and it's not my objective. It doesn't make sense strategically. Wouldn't be worth the time. But here's a podcast I linked. It's cult expert Rick Ross decodes brainwashing tactics. And if you just take everything he says and you apply it to the mainstream media, and you just replace cult leader with big brother, it makes sense. We're talking about the same basic structure when it comes to this. But let me just play a short clip if you're not familiar with Rick Ross, who is a real cult deprogrammer. He gets people out of destructive religious cults all the time.
100 people involved, perhaps 200 at the most, and they lived in relative isolation outside of a town called Waco in Texas. I deprogrammed a Davidian before the government raided the facility. He was visiting his family in California, and he identified that they had very large stockpiles of weapons and that the leader had actually used his credit card to purchase at that time in around 1990, $5,000 in bullets. This was very alarming. Later, I would be contacted by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and they would interview me and then meet with this former Davidian who I successfully deprogrammed. Later, during the standoff.
Anyway, he has many insights about coercive persuasion techniques, and a lot of it has to do with isolation. And by isolation, it doesn't necessarily have to be physical, but it could be, don't invite your crazy uncle over for Thanksgiving because he's going to talk conspiracy theories. It's about the mental quarantine. I'll post a link here. And also, if you want to get a link to anything, I have all my receipts posted at minds.com/Infinite Plane Society. But I think this is useful, the study of cult deprogramming, destructive groups, and how the individual sacrifices their self and their autonomy to become part of the group, and why they defend the group, and social isolation, control, huge part of it. I'll play a short clip here. This is all very relevant because we're looking at the mainstream media is quite literally a cult. It's a church. It's the de facto world state church. It has its God constructs. It's got within it subsets, which are like the MSM plus, what I call Trutherville and Woketown, increasingly culty the deeper you go.
The group required David Koresh to create extreme isolation. The members could not visit their families. They could not leave the compound alone. There were only 2 phones in the compound.
In 2020, we saw a mass cult indoctrination, and we saw all the aspects of cult brainwashing in play en masse to the multitudes, and it worked. We watched what I called, what it truly ended up being, in my view, was the imposition of a global religion, and everybody kneeled to it. They even stopped running circles around the cube. All the churches shut down for Easter. It was like COVID Akbar, this new god. Well, Gaia is the God construct. COVID is like the devil that the atheists believe in, who brings the sin, and of course, virus is a modern iteration of the concept of sin. And if you want to be saved from sin, you go to church, which in this case would be the mass media, and you have their priesthood give you the injectable Eucharist. So it was a new religious paradigm. Everything about it, all the trappings, suggested that this was a new faith, religious garments. You could almost equate, in many ways, PPE to like a nun's habit, or a hijab, or a burqa. It's all perfect. And the social isolation thing. Now, is it a bad thing? Asks Angst G. Good question. I'm advocating right now, at least for this, that we quarantine from Trutherville, from Woketown, and from the mainstream media box. This is a philosophical quarantine. But social isolation can be a bad thing. It depends on who you're locked up with. Are you trapped in an elevator with a bunch of QAnons? Is your sole source of information Rumble or Facebook memes? So there's different ways of isolation here. And I'm talking more about like echo chambers. And this is not an echo chamber. The IPS think tank has always been an open platform. George Orwell, 1984, says, quote, "The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final and most essential command." And this is true when it comes to media, where people are outsourcing a great deal of their perception. I call it see-say. You got hearsay and see-say. You saw it on the screen, and you can go ahead and repeat it as though you saw it yourself, or as though it's real. And the evidence of your own eyes and ears might contradict what the screen shows you. So you must reject that. This is an article from the Nebraska Examiner, just bemoaning the destruction wrought by misinformation and conspiracy theories and how it's affecting disaster recovery. It says, quote, "We are well beyond alternative facts, weapons of mass destruction." Now, I said a couple years ago that WMDs, weapons of mass destruction, are going to be replaced by mis, and disinformation. Mind viruses, which carry misinformation, making these things into basically mind virus epidemics. So well beyond alternative facts, weapons of mass destruction, garden variety online rumors. One might wonder, do we as consumers of information bear any responsibility in the rising sea of deceit? Or are we complicit when we shrug, shake our heads, or write commentaries and move on? Very well put. Rising sea of deceit. And that's why I typify what we're doing here as a raft. You know, penguins, when they get on the water, they form a raft. And we're living in, or atop right now, the sea of irrelevance, a time where there's so much information you can't parse it all. Nobody's fact-checking, and it's just a flood, a nonstop flood. There's not enough time in the day to go through every news story. So if you don't have a methodology for sifting through it, you're going to be lost. You're going to be like Mark Cuban, whining about how now that the peasants can buy blue checks, I don't know who to follow. I think it's safer to auto-hoax the news, to become the arbiter over what you believe, to not outsource something so important. All right, let me go through my bookmarks. Now, if you're waiting for a press pass, and I think this last shooter was used, actually, this last would-be Trump assassin, to put some fear in the public about people who have press passes. Probably not a coincidence. But if you're awaiting a press pass from the IPS headquarters, it's going to be a little late because Zazzle ceased producing them. I'm looking for a local printer now, but I'll let you know. I'll have them out before Autohoax Con. I put a link to the flyer, so if you want to check that out, if you know anybody who might want to join us, whether as an attendee or as a speaker, or if there's somebody you want me to recommend or invite to speak at Autohoax Con, just send me a message, and I'm going to be organizing that the rest of this week. And as we get more information, as we have more guests confirming, I'll promote it. And one final note here. If you get on the newsletter now at ips.monster, you're going to get a link to the next episode of IPS Deep Think Tank, which is a group chat. And we just did 2 so far. It's going to be 2 per week. You don't want to miss the next one. And yes, I'm going to invite Cubstar, as Armin Rhee has suggested. Elephant Tusk says, don't let the press pass fall into the wrong hands. Yeah, I'm very well aware of it, of the attempts that we might see to co-opt. And we saw this before. We've seen how they can put bad actors ahead of good ideas in order to destroy those good ideas. Standard procedure, that's how they operate, and I'm certainly wary of that. The purpose of the press passes is so that you can be essential. Media is essential, unlockdownable. And we're also working on content creation, which we're going to be spearheading a whole wave of content creation and investigative deep dives from the off-world stage perspective. Far different from anything else. We're not regurgitating mainstream and alternative. We're trying to compete in their space. Quite the opposite. What we are doing is we are examining the infrastructure of media itself, reality testing its claims. So we are not doing media in the same sense. We're not like alt media. We're not anti. This is anti-pro. This is outside their box. So this is it's more akin to philosophy, film criticism than ideology or politics. So we shouldn't be getting censored. Okay, thanks again for joining. I'm going to send out the archives here shortly, and we'll continue this conversation tomorrow. It is 10/14/2024. This is Chief Crow Autohoax. I'll put links below to all of the relevant videos I shared tonight.
I'm on Autohoax, and it feels so good.
And thanks again, one more time, to all of you persistent, I'm not going to say complainers, but critics, constructive critics, who walked me through fixing the volume. It's definitely a lot louder. I checked it out, so thanks again for that. Have a great evening.
Got time, baby, for another crisis actor with soulless eyes. My buddy, and me. Telecommunications Act of 1996. 96, y'all. Gonna filter your eyes and scrub your mind. The weatherman, he's just another bad joke. You can be a doomed little donkey like Eeyore. I'm gonna be on Autohoax, and it feels so good. You just ought to believe everything like I knew that you would. In my dream, you know I ain't got time. Baby, for another crisis actor with soulless